The cold Seattle rain had stopped falling, but Marcus Thompson's clothes were still wet. Water dripped from his old jacket as he walked down the busy street. His shoes had holes in them, and his pants were dirty from sleeping outside. He had not eaten anything hot in 2 days. Marcus stopped in front of a big glass window. Inside, he could see people eating at clean white tables. The restaurant was called the Golden Spoon. Warm yellow lights made everything look cozy. People were laughing and talking while they ate their dinner. The smell of fresh bread came through the door when people walked in and out. Marcus touched his pocket. He had $20. It was all the money he had left, but he was so hungry. He had been walking around the city all day looking for work, but no one would hire him. People looked at his dirty clothes and walked away quickly. He pushed open the heavy glass door. A small bell rang as he walked inside. The restaurant was warm and smelled like roasted chicken and fresh vegetables. Soft music played in the background. Marcus felt embarrassed about how he looked, but he just wanted a hot meal. People at the tables stopped talking and stared at him. A woman in a red dress moved her purse closer to her. A man in a suit whispered something to his wife. Marcus kept his head down and walked slowly toward the front desk. Jake Morrison was wiping down menus behind the host stand. He was 22 years old and had been working at the Golden Spoon for 6 months. Jake was proud of his job at such a nice restaurant. He always made sure his white shirt was clean and his black tie was straight. When Jake looked up and saw Marcus, his face changed. Jake's eyes went from Marcus's wet hair down to his dirty shoes. Jake quickly walked around the desk and stood in front of Marcus. "Excuse me, sir," Jake said in a loud voice. "I need you to leave right now." Marcus looked up with tired eyes. "I just want to buy some food," he said quietly. "I have money." Jake shook his head. "This is a family restaurant. We have standards here. You can't come in looking like that." Other customers were watching now. Some people took out their phones to record what was happening. Marcus could feel everyone staring at him. His face turned red with shame. "Please," Marcus said. "I'm very hungry. I just want to sit in a corner somewhere. I won't bother anyone." Jake crossed his arms. "Listen, buddy. I don't make the rules. This place has a dress code. You need to wear nice clothes to eat here. Maybe try the McDonald's down the street." Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out a $20 bill. The money was wrinkled but real. "See, I can pay for my food." Jake looked at the money but didn't care. "It doesn't matter if you have money. Look around you. Does it look like you belong here?" Marcus looked around the restaurant. Everyone was dressed nicely. The men wore suits or clean shirts. The women had on pretty dresses and jewelry. Their hair was clean and styled. Marcus looked down at his own clothes. His jacket was torn at the sleeve. His pants had stains on them. His shoes were falling apart. But Marcus remembered when things were different. He remembered wearing nice suits and clean shirts. He remembered when people treated him with respect. That felt like a long time ago now. "I understand I don't look my best," Marcus said carefully. "But I'm a human being, just like everyone else here. I just want to buy a meal." Jake stepped closer to Marcus. "Look, I'm trying to be nice about this, but you're making my other customers uncomfortable. You need to leave now or I'll have to call security." An older woman at a nearby table was watching everything. Her name was Elena Rodriguez, and she had been coming to this restaurant for many years. She frowned as she watched Jake treat Marcus so badly. "There's no need to be rude to the man," Mrs. Rodriguez said to Jake. "He's just asking for food." Jake turned to her. "Ma'am, I'm just doing my job. We have to maintain certain standards." A man at another table spoke up. "The guy looks homeless. He probably doesn't have any money anyway." "I do have money," Marcus said again, holding up the $20 bill. "I worked for this money. I just want to buy some food." Jake grabbed Marcus by the arm. "Okay, that's enough. You need to go now." Marcus didn't fight back. He let Jake lead him toward the door. As they walked past the tables, Marcus could hear people talking about him. "Why don't they just let him eat?" a young woman whispered to her boyfriend. "Because this is a nice place," the boyfriend answered. "They can't let just anyone in here." "He seems polite enough." the woman said back. Polite doesn't matter if you're dirty, another customer said loudly. Marcus felt his heart breaking a little more with each comment. These people didn't know anything about him. They didn't know that he used to be successful. They didn't know about all the hard times that had brought him to this place. All they saw was a homeless man in dirty clothes. When they reached the door, Jake opened it and waited for Marcus to leave. The cold air hit Marcus's face. Please, Marcus said one more time. I'm not trying to cause trouble. I just haven't eaten in 2 days. Jake's face didn't change. That's not my problem. Try a soup kitchen or something. Marcus stepped outside. The door closed behind him with a loud click. He stood on the sidewalk, for a moment looking back through the big window. Inside, people were already going back to their conversations and their meals. It was like nothing had happened. Marcus put the $20 bill back in his pocket. He pulled his thin jacket tighter around his body and started walking down the street. His stomach was still empty, and now his heart hurt too. Behind him, Mrs. Rodriguez was still watching through the window. She had a sad look on her face. She thought about saying something to the manager, but Jake had already gone back to his work like everything was normal. Marcus walked slowly down the sidewalk. The city lights reflected on the wet street. He passed other restaurants, but he knew they would probably treat him the same way. When you look homeless, most people don't see you as a real person anymore. But Marcus was a real person. He had feelings and dreams and memories. He had a story that no one bothered to learn. As he walked away from the Golden Spoon, Marcus didn't know that this was just the beginning of something much bigger. Mrs. Elena Rodriguez sat at her favorite table by the window. She came to the Golden Spoon every Tuesday night for dinner. She had been doing this for 15 years, ever since her husband died. The restaurant felt like a second home to her. Tonight, something was different. She could not stop thinking about what had just happened. The way that young waiter treated the homeless man made her feel sick to her stomach. In all her years coming here, she had never seen anything like it. Elena was 73 years old. She had lived through many hard times in her life. She grew up poor in Mexico before moving to America as a young woman. She knew what it felt like to be looked down on because of how you dressed or where you came from. She watched through the window as the homeless man walked slowly down the street. Something about him seemed familiar, but she could not figure out what it was. The way he carried himself was different from other homeless people she had seen. Even in his dirty clothes, he had good posture. He spoke politely and used good manners. There was something about his eyes that reminded her of someone, but she could not remember who. Elena looked around the restaurant. Most people had already forgotten what happened. They were back to eating their expensive meals and talking about their daily problems. It made her angry that they could ignore what they had just seen. At the table next to her, a young couple was talking. I felt bad for that guy, the woman said quietly. Why? Her boyfriend asked. He was probably just going to cause trouble. He seemed nice enough, the woman said. All he wanted was some food. But you can't just let anyone into a nice place like this, the boyfriend said. What if he scared away other customers? He wasn't scary, the woman said. He was just hungry. Elena wanted to tell them they were right to feel bad. She wanted to say that the waiter was wrong to treat someone so badly, but she kept quiet and listened. At another table, a family was talking about it too. Daddy, why couldn't that man eat? Here, a little girl asked her father. The father looked uncomfortable. Well, honey, sometimes restaurants have rules about how people need to dress. But he looked sad, the little girl said. And he said he was hungry. I know, sweetheart, the father said. But that's just how things work sometimes. The little girl didn't understand. That doesn't seem fair. Her mother smiled sadly. You're right, honey. It's not always fair. Elena smiled when she heard the little girl. Children often understood right and wrong better than adults did. Adults made excuses for bad behavior. Children just knew when something was wrong. She looked toward the front of the restaurant where Jake was working. He was seating a new family at a table. He smiled and was very polite to them. They were dressed nicely in clean clothes. Jake treated them like they were very important. Elena had watched Jake work for several months. He was usually a good waiter. He was polite to customers and worked hard. But tonight she saw a different side of him. She saw how quickly he judged someone based on their appearance. She saw how little kindness he showed to someone who needed it most. Behind the host's stand, other workers were talking quietly. Elena could not hear exactly what they were saying, but she could tell they were talking about what had happened. Some of them looked uncomfortable. They probably knew that Jake had done something wrong, but none of them had tried to stop him. A young waitress named Amy was cleaning tables nearby. Elena had talked to Amy many times over the years. Amy was always friendly and kind. Tonight, Amy looked upset. Elena called Amy over to her table. "Are you okay, dear?" Elena asked. Amy looked around to make sure no one was listening. Then she sat down at Elena's table for a moment. "I feel terrible about what just happened," Amy whispered. "That poor man just wanted something to eat." "Why didn't anyone say anything?" Elena asked. Amy sighed. "Jake is the assistant manager's favorite. Nobody wants to get in trouble with him. And Sarah is in the back office doing paperwork. She didn't even see what happened." "Sarah is the manager?" Elena asked. "Assistant manager," Amy said. "The real manager only comes in during the day. Sarah is in charge at night." Elena nodded. She had met Sarah a few times. Sarah seemed like a nice person. Elena wondered if Sarah would have handled things differently. "I wanted to say something," Amy continued, "but Jake was so aggressive about it. He made it seem like the man was dangerous or something. He wasn't dangerous at all. He was just hungry and sad." "You should tell Sarah what happened," Elena said. Amy shook her head. "I can't. Jake would get me in trouble. I need this job. I have 2 kids at home." Elena understood. Sometimes people had to stay quiet to protect themselves. But that didn't make it right. Amy got up to go back to work. Elena sat alone at her table, thinking. She had been coming to this restaurant for 15 years. She had seen it change from a small, friendly place to a fancier restaurant. But the one thing that had never changed was how they treated customers. Everyone was always welcome here. Until tonight. Elena tried to remember the early days of the Golden Spoon. Back then, the owner used to walk around and talk to customers. He was a nice man who cared about making everyone feel welcome. What was his name? She could not quite remember, but she thought it started with an M. Michael? Martin? Marcus. That was it. Marcus Thompson. He used to stop by her table and ask how she was doing. He would remember things about her life and ask about her grandchildren. He made everyone feel special. Elena had not seen Marcus in a long time, maybe 2 or 3 years. She wondered what had happened to him. Did he sell the restaurant? Did he retire? She realized she had never asked anyone about it. The homeless man's face flashed in her mind again. Those eyes, that polite way of speaking. Could it be possible? No, she told herself. That was crazy thinking. Marcus Thompson was a successful businessman. He would never end up homeless on the street. But still, something about that man seemed so familiar. Elena finished her dinner, but she could not enjoy it. Every bite reminded her of the hungry man who had been turned away. She thought about all the food that would probably be thrown away at the end of the night. Food that could have fed someone who really needed it. When Amy brought her the check, Elena left a big tip. She also wrote a note on her napkin. "Please give this to Sarah," she told Amy. "Tell her it's important." Amy read the note quickly. It said, "I saw what happened tonight with the homeless man. We need to talk. Elena Rodriguez, table 12. Amy looked worried. "Are you going to get Jake in trouble?" "I'm going to make sure this doesn't happen again," Elena said. As Elena walked to the door, she looked back at the restaurant one more time. She thought about all the good memories she had here. She hoped those memories would not be ruined by what she saw tonight. Outside, she looked up and down the street, hoping to see the homeless man again. But he was gone. She felt bad that she had not done something to help him when she had the chance. Elena drove home slowly. She lived in a small apartment about 10 minutes away. As she drove, she kept thinking about the man's eyes. They were sad but not angry. They were the eyes of someone who had given up hope, but was still trying to be polite and kind. When she got home, Elena looked through some old photos. She found a picture from a company party at the Golden Spoon about 5 years ago. There was Marcus Thompson, smiling and shaking hands with customers. She looked closely at his face, trying to compare it to the homeless man she had seen tonight. It was hard to tell. The homeless man looked much older and thinner. His hair was longer and messier, but those eyes, those could be the same eyes. Elena decided she would go back to the restaurant tomorrow. She would talk to Sarah and tell her what had happened, and if she saw that homeless man again, she would make sure he got a proper meal, no matter what anyone else said. The more she thought about it, the more sure she became. That homeless man was not just any stranger. She had seen him before, in better times. And if she was right about who he was, then what happened tonight was much worse than just being rude to a customer. It was time for someone to learn the truth. 3 months earlier, Marcus Thompson's life was completely different. He woke up every morning in a beautiful house with his wife, Linda. They had been married for 22 years and loved each other very much. Marcus owned 3 restaurants, and the Golden Spoon was his first and favorite one. Marcus started the Golden Spoon 15 years ago with just a small loan and a big dream. In the beginning, it was just a tiny place with 6 tables. Marcus cooked the food himself while Linda waited on customers. They worked 18 hours a day, 7 days a week, but they were happy because they were building something together. Slowly, the restaurant grew. More customers came every week. Marcus hired more workers and bought better equipment. After 5 years, he opened a second location, then a third, one. People loved the food and the friendly service. Marcus made sure every customer felt welcome, no matter who they were or how much money they had. Marcus and Linda never had children, but the restaurants were like their babies. They put all their love and energy into making them successful. Marcus knew every employee by name. He knew their families and their problems. When someone needed help, Marcus was always there. Linda worked as the bookkeeper for all 3 restaurants. She was very good with numbers and kept track of every dollar. Marcus trusted her completely with the business side of things. He focused on the food and the customers while she handled the money and the paperwork. Their life was good. They had a nice house, 2 cars, and money in the bank. They took vacations together and talked about retiring someday to travel around the world. Marcus thought their life would always be this happy. Then everything started to fall apart. It began when Linda started feeling tired all the time. At first, they thought she was just working too hard. But the tiredness got worse. Then she started losing weight even though she was eating normally. Marcus begged her to see a doctor. The news was terrible. Linda had cancer, and it was already very advanced. The doctor said they could try treatments, but there was not much hope. Linda might live for 6 months, maybe a year if they were lucky. Marcus felt like his world was ending. Linda was not just his wife. She was his best friend, his business partner, and the most important person in his life. He could not imagine living without her. Marcus decided to fight the cancer with everything he had. He took Linda to the best doctors in the country. They tried expensive treatments that were not covered by insurance. Marcus spent thousands and thousands of dollars trying to save his wife's life. For 6 months, Marcus barely went to his restaurants. He spent all his time taking care of Linda. He hired nurses to help at home. He bought special medicines and equipment. He would have spent every penny he had if it could have saved her. But the cancer was too strong. Linda died on a cold Tuesday morning in January. Marcus was holding her hand when she took her last breath. He felt like part of his soul died with her. After the funeral, Marcus could not think straight. Everything reminded him of Linda, their house, the restaurants, even his own face in the mirror. He was so sad that he could barely get out of bed in the morning. The medical bills were enormous. Even with insurance, Marcus owed more than $200,000. He had to sell his house and most of his belongings to pay the hospitals and doctors. He moved into a small apartment and tried to keep working. But Marcus could not focus on the restaurants anymore. Food that used to taste delicious now had no flavor. Customers who used to make him smile now just reminded him that Linda was gone. He started drinking to numb the pain, which made everything worse. That's when his business partner, David Chen, started taking advantage of the situation. David had invested money in the restaurants 2 years earlier, when Marcus wanted to expand. David was supposed to be a silent partner, but he saw that Marcus was falling apart. David started making decisions without asking Marcus. He changed suppliers to cheaper ones that paid him kickbacks. He fired good employees and hired his friends instead. He raised prices, but lowered the quality of food. Worst of all, he started taking money from the business accounts. Marcus was too depressed to notice what was happening. He trusted David and thought his partner was just helping him through a hard time. By the time Marcus realized what was going on, David had stolen almost everything. When Marcus finally looked at the books, he discovered that David had emptied the business bank accounts. David had also sold equipment and kept the money for himself. He had even taken out loans using the restaurants as collateral. Marcus tried to stop David, but it was too late. David had covered his tracks well. He had forged documents and made it look like Marcus had approved everything. When Marcus went to the police, they said it was a civil matter, not a criminal one. David's lawyers were better than any lawyer Marcus could afford. David disappeared one day, taking all the stolen money with him. Marcus never saw him again. The restaurants were left with huge debts and no money to pay them. The bank started foreclosure proceedings. Suppliers demanded payment for food that had already been delivered and eaten. Marcus tried to save his businesses, but it was hopeless. One by one, his restaurants had to close. First the second location, then the third. Finally, even the Golden Spoon was in danger of closing forever. Marcus made a deal with the bank. He could keep the Golden Spoon open, but he had to give up his ownership rights. A management company would run the restaurant and pay him a small percentage of the profits. It was better than losing everything completely, but it meant Marcus was no longer the real owner of his life's work. For a few weeks, Marcus tried to work as just an employee in his own restaurant, but it was too painful. Everywhere he looked, he saw memories of Linda. Every dish on the menu was something they had created together. Every corner of the restaurant had a story about their life together. Marcus started missing work. He would call in sick and spend the day walking around the city or sitting in the park. The new managers were not happy with him. They said he was unreliable and not a good fit for their team. After a month, they fired him from his own restaurant. Marcus had no job, no money, and nowhere to live. The small apartment was too expensive without any income. He tried to find other work, but he was 55 years old and had only worked in restaurants his whole life. Nobody wanted to hire a sad older man with no recent experience. Marcus lost his apartment and ended up on the street. He slept in shelters when he could find space, and outside when he could not. He had never imagined that his life could fall apart so completely and so quickly. The worst part was not the cold or the hunger or the dirty clothes. The worst part was becoming invisible. People looked right through him like he was not even human. Nobody wanted to hear his story or learn about who he used to be. To everyone else, he was just another homeless person to avoid. Marcus still had a few important papers in an old backpack: his birth certificate, his marriage license, and some business documents from the Golden Spoon. These papers were the only proof left of the life he used to have. Sometimes Marcus would walk past the Golden Spoon and look through the windows. He could see that the new managers had changed things. The menu was different. The decorations were different. Even the feeling of the place was different. It was still a nice restaurant, but it was not his restaurant anymore. Marcus told himself he would get his life back together someday. He would find a job and save money, and maybe even open a new restaurant. But each day on the street made it harder to believe in that dream. The other homeless people he met had their own sad stories. Some had mental illness, some had lost jobs, some had problems with drugs or alcohol. But all of them had been regular people once, just like Marcus. They all had families and dreams and hopes for the future. Marcus learned that anybody could end up homeless. It did not matter how successful you used to be or how hard you had worked. Sometimes life just knocked you down so hard that you could not get back up. But Marcus never stopped being polite and kind. Even when people treated him badly, he said please and thank you. Even when he was hungry and cold, he tried to smile. He remembered what it felt like to be treated with respect, and he still treated others that way. That's why it hurt so much when Jake refused to serve him at the Golden Spoon. It was not just any restaurant. It was the place where Marcus had spent the best years of his life. It was where he and Linda had built their dreams together, and now he was not even allowed to buy a meal there. The next evening, Marcus walked slowly toward the Golden Spoon again. He had spent all day thinking about what happened the night before. Part of him wanted to stay away and never come back, but another part of him could not let it go. This was his restaurant. He had built it with his own hands and his own dreams. Marcus had not slept well the night before. He spent the night in a doorway 3 blocks away from the restaurant. Every time he closed his eyes, he could see Jake's face looking at him with disgust. He could hear the other customers talking about him like he was not even human. But Marcus also remembered better times. He remembered the first day the Golden Spoon opened, when he and Linda were so excited they could barely contain themselves. He remembered regular customers who became like family to him. He remembered employees who worked hard and trusted him to take care of them. This restaurant was more than just a business to Marcus, it was his legacy. It was proof that he had done something good with his life. Even if he had lost everything else, he still had a connection to this place. Marcus had made a decision during the long, cold night. He was going to tell the truth about who he was. He was going to show them the papers he kept in his backpack. Maybe then they would understand that he was not just some random homeless person causing trouble. As Marcus got closer to the restaurant, he could see it was very busy. It was dinner time on a Wednesday and every table looked full. People were waiting outside for tables to open up. The Golden Spoon had always been popular, but it seemed even busier now than when Marcus owned it. Marcus stopped across the street and watched for a few minutes. Through the big windows, he could see families eating together and couples on dates. Everyone looked happy and comfortable. The warm yellow lights made everything look perfect, like a scene from a movie. Marcus looked down at his own clothes. They were the same dirty clothes he had worn yesterday, plus another night of sleeping outside. His jacket had a new tear in it from catching on a fence. His shoes were even more worn out. He probably smelled bad too, though he was used to it by now. Maybe this was a mistake. Maybe he should just walk away and never come back. What if they called the police this time? What if they banned him from even walking past the restaurant? But then Marcus remembered something Linda used to say to him. She would say, "Marcus, you never give up on something you love. You fight for it even when fighting is hard." Marcus crossed the street and walked toward the restaurant door. His heart was beating fast and his hands were shaking. But he kept walking. The same little bell rang when he opened the door. Once again, the warm air and delicious smells hit him. Once again, people stopped talking and stared at him. But this time, Marcus held his head up higher. Jake was at the host's stand, just like the night before. When he saw Marcus, his face immediately changed from friendly to angry. "Oh, come on," Jake said loudly. "Not you again. I told you yesterday that you can't come in here." Other customers turned to look. Some of them had their phones out, ready to record whatever happened next. Marcus could feel dozens of eyes watching him, but he tried to stay calm. "I need to speak with the manager," Marcus said clearly. Jake laughed. "The manager? What could you possibly need to talk to the manager about?" "I have something important to tell her," Marcus said. "It's about this restaurant." "Let me guess," Jake said, getting louder. "You want to complain about how I treated you yesterday? Well, save your breath. I did my job exactly right." More people were watching now. The whole front section of the restaurant had gone quiet. Even the servers had stopped working to see what was happening. "Please," Marcus said. "Just let me talk to someone in charge. I think there's been a misunderstanding." Jake stepped closer to Marcus, invading his personal space. "The only misunderstanding is you thinking you belong in a place like this. Look around you, man. Look at how everyone else is dressed. Look at yourself." Marcus did look around. Everyone was staring at him with a mixture of curiosity and disgust. Some people looked sympathetic, but most just looked uncomfortable. A few people were shaking their heads in disapproval. "I know I don't look like I belong here," Marcus said, "but appearances can be deceiving. If you would just let me explain. Explain what? Jake interrupted. That you're not really homeless? That those aren't really dirty clothes? That you don't really smell like you haven't showered in weeks? Some customers laughed at Jake's comments. Marcus felt his face turn red with embarrassment, but he did not give up. I am homeless, Marcus said honestly. And these are dirty clothes, but that doesn't mean I don't have a right to be here. Jake threw his hands up in the air. A right to be here? This is a private business, buddy. We have the right to refuse service to anyone, and we're refusing service to you. An older man at a nearby table spoke up. Just let the man order some food, for crying out loud. What's the big deal? Jake turned to the customer. Sir, I appreciate your concern, but we have policies here. We can't just let anyone walk in off the street. He's not anyone, a woman said from another table. He's a human being who wants to buy dinner. With what money? A different customer asked. He's probably just going to order food and then say he can't pay for it. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his $20 bill again. He held it up high so everyone could see it. I have money, Marcus said firmly. I'm not trying to get free food. I just want to buy a meal like anyone else. Jake looked at the money but still shook his head. I don't care if you have $100. You're not eating here. This is a respectable establishment. And I'm not a respectable person? Marcus asked. Look at yourself, Jake said cruelly. What do you think? That comment made several customers gasp. Even people who had been supporting Jake started to look uncomfortable. A young woman near the window took out her phone and started recording. Marcus felt something break inside him. All the sadness and anger from the last few months came rushing up. His wife was dead. His business was gone. His house was gone. His friends had all disappeared. And now he could not even buy a meal in the restaurant he had created. You want to know what I think? Marcus said, his voice getting louder. I think you don't know anything about me. I think you're judging me based on how I look instead of who I am. Who you are is a homeless person causing trouble in my restaurant, Jake shot back. Your restaurant? Marcus said. Your restaurant? Jake's eyes narrowed. That's right. I work here. I belong here. You don't. Marcus reached for his backpack. Actually, I think you might be surprised about who belongs here and who doesn't. What are you doing? Jake asked suspiciously. I'm going to show you something, Marcus said, unzipping his backpack. Papers that prove who I really am. Jake rolled his eyes. Oh, this should be good. Let me guess. You're secretly a millionaire, right? Or maybe you're a famous movie star in disguise? Something like that. Marcus said quietly. He pulled out his folder of documents. The papers were old and worn, but they were still readable. Marcus opened the folder and took out the business license for the Golden Spoon. This might interest you, Marcus said, holding up the paper. Jake barely glanced at it. What is this supposed to be? The original business license for this restaurant, Marcus said, filed with the city of Seattle 15 years ago. So what? Jake said. You probably found that in a dumpster somewhere. Marcus took out another paper. This is the incorporation document for Golden Spoon Enterprises. And this is the property deed for this building. Now Jake looked a little more interested but still skeptical. Anyone can fake papers like that. Look at the name, Marcus said, pointing to the documents. Look at who signed these papers. Jake looked more closely. On every document in clear black ink was the signature. Marcus Thompson, owner. Marcus Thompson, Jake read out loud. Then he looked up at Marcus with confusion. Wait, that's my name, Marcus said simply. I'm Marcus Thompson, and this is my restaurant. The entire front section of the Golden Spoon went completely silent. Even the kitchen noise seemed to stop. Everyone was staring at Marcus and Jake, waiting to see what would happen next. Jake's face went through several different expressions. First confusion, then disbelief, then worry, then panic. That's impossible, Jake said, but his voice was much quieter now. You can't be, you're homeless. Yes, I am, Marcus said. But I'm also the person who built this place from nothing. I'm the person who designed this menu and hired the first employees and served the first customers. But, Jake stammered. The owner is some management company. They're the ones who hired me. The management company runs the restaurant now, Marcus explained. But I still own a piece of it. And more importantly, I created it. Every table, every recipe, every tradition in this place came from me. Jake looked around desperately, as if hoping someone would tell him this was all a joke. But the customers were all watching with fascination and shock. Some people were openly staring at Jake, wondering how he would handle this revelation. Even if that's true, Jake said weakly, you still can't come in here looking like that. There are still rules. Marcus smiled sadly. Those rules were my rules, son. I made them to ensure good service and a pleasant atmosphere, but I never made them to keep hungry people from eating. Marcus stood in the middle of the restaurant holding his papers. Everyone was staring at him and Jake. The silence was so complete that Marcus could hear the kitchen fans running and the soft music playing overhead. Jake's face was pale, but he was not ready to give up. He looked at the papers in Marcus's hands with suspicious eyes. Anyone can get fake papers made, Jake said, but his voice sounded less confident than before. There are places downtown that make fake IDs and documents for homeless people all the time. Marcus felt disappointed but not surprised. He had expected this reaction. People found it easier to believe lies than to accept an uncomfortable truth. These aren't fake, Marcus said calmly. He spread the papers out on the host stand so everyone could see them better. Look at the dates. Look at the city seals. Look at the official stamps. A businessman at a nearby table stood up and walked over. He was wearing an expensive suit and had a briefcase with him. He looked like someone who knew about legal documents. May I? The businessman asked, pointing to the papers. Marcus nodded. Please. The businessman picked up the business license and examined it carefully. He held it up to the light and looked at the watermarks. He checked the official seals and stamps. He read through the legal language carefully. This looks authentic to me, the businessman said. The paper is the right age. The seals are genuine. The legal language is correct for documents from 15 years ago. Jake shifted nervously. Well, maybe they're real papers, but that doesn't mean he's really Marcus Thompson. Maybe he stole them from someone. The businessman picked up another document, the property deed for the building. This paper was even older and more official looking. It had multiple signatures and notary stamps. This deed shows that Marcus Thompson purchased this building 15 years ago, the businessman said. It lists his social security number and his address at the time. Marcus reached into his wallet and pulled out his old, worn identification card. The picture was from several years ago, when he still looked healthy and well-dressed. But it was clearly the same person. Here's my driver's license, Marcus said. Same name, same social security number. The businessman compared the ID to the documents. The numbers match perfectly. These papers definitely belong to this man. Jake grabbed the license and looked at it closely. In the photo, Marcus had short, neat hair and was wearing a suit and tie. He looked like a successful businessman. It was hard to believe it was the same person as the homeless man standing in front of them now. But the eyes were the same. And when Jake looked carefully, he could see the same bone structure and facial features. It really was the same person. This could still be fake, Jake said desperately. People can fake driver's licenses too. A woman at another table stood up. Marcus recognized her immediately. It was Mrs. Rodriguez, the lady who had watched everything happen the night before. It's not fake, Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. I remember him. Everyone turned to look at her. She walked slowly toward Marcus, studying his face carefully. You're Marcus Thompson, she said with certainty. You used to walk around this restaurant and talk to customers. You always asked about my grandchildren. You remembered my name and my favorite table. Marcus smiled for the first time since entering the restaurant. Mrs. Rodriguez, table 12 by the window. You always order the salmon with extra vegetables, no rice. Mrs. Rodriguez's eyes filled with tears. That's right. And you always asked about my grandson Miguel's baseball games. How is Miguel doing? Marcus asked. Is he still playing? He's in college now, Mrs. Rodriguez said. Got a scholarship to play baseball at the University of Washington. That's wonderful, Marcus said genuinely. You must be very proud. Other customers were watching this exchange with amazement. Jake looked back and forth between Marcus and Mrs. Rodriguez, trying to figure out if they were working together somehow. Mrs. Rodriguez, Jake said carefully, are you sure you remember this? Man, I mean, he looks very different from how a restaurant owner would look. Mrs. Rodriguez turned to Jake with anger in her eyes. Young man, I have been coming to this restaurant for 15 years. I remember when it first opened. Marcus Thompson was here every single day making sure everything was perfect. He cared about every customer and every employee. She turned back to Marcus with sad eyes. What happened to you? Where have you been? Marcus's smile faded. It's a long story, Mrs. Rodriguez. I lost everything. My wife died. My business partner stole from me, and I ended up on the streets. Oh, my dear, Mrs. Rodriguez said, reaching out to touch his arm. I'm so sorry. I heard about Linda's death, but I didn't know about the rest. Other people in the restaurant were starting to murmur among themselves. The story was spreading from table to table. The homeless man who had been thrown out was actually the person who had built this place. A young man with his phone out had been recording everything. This is incredible, he said to his girlfriend. This guy is the real owner of the restaurant. Not the owner anymore, Marcus corrected. I had to give up most of my ownership when I couldn't pay the debts. A management company runs it now, but you still have some ownership? The businessman asked. Marcus nodded and pulled out another document. According to the last contract I signed, I retain a 20% stake in the business. I also have the right to buy back full ownership if I can ever pay off the remaining debts. Jake was looking more and more panicked as the truth became clear. He had not just been rude to a customer. He had been rude to someone who was technically one of his bosses. Look, Jake said, his voice shaking slightly. Even if all this is true, you still can't come in here looking like this. What would other customers think? They would think we treat all people with dignity and respect, Mrs. Rodriguez said sharply. The way Marcus always treated everyone when he ran this place. A teenage girl at a corner table spoke up. This is so cool. It's like a movie or something. The secret owner comes back disguised as a homeless person. Her father frowned at her. It's not a movie, honey. This is real life. That makes it even cooler, the girl said. Marcus looked around the restaurant at all the faces watching him. Some people looked excited by the drama. Others looked uncomfortable. A few people looked genuinely moved by his story. I understand. Why this is hard to believe, Marcus said to everyone. I know I don't look like the successful businessman I used to be, but life can change very quickly. Anyone here could end up in my situation if they faced enough bad luck at once. A woman with 2 small children nodded. That's so true. We lost our house 2 years ago when my husband got laid off. If we didn't have family to help us, we could have ended up homeless too. See? Marcus said. It can happen to anyone. The only difference between me and you is circumstances. Jake was looking through the papers again, hoping to find some proof that they were fake. But everything looked genuine. The dates, the signatures, the official seals, it all checked out. Even if you really are Marcus Thompson, Jake said quietly, you're not the owner anymore. The management company hired me. They're my bosses, not you. That's true, Marcus admitted. But morally and ethically, I think you should treat all customers with respect, regardless of who owns the restaurant. A man in a chef's uniform came out of the kitchen. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with gray hair and kind eyes. He looked at the crowd gathered around the host stand with confusion. What's going on out here? The chef asked. Mrs. Rodriguez turned to him. Carlos, do you remember Marcus Thompson? Carlos looked at Marcus carefully. Recognition slowly spread across his face. Marcus, is that really you? Marcus smiled. Hello, Carlos. It's good to see you again. Carlos had worked at the Golden Spoon for 8 years before Marcus lost the restaurant. He had been one of Marcus's most trusted employees. What happened to you? Carlos asked with concern. We heard the restaurant was sold, but nobody told us what happened to you and Linda. Linda died, Marcus said simply. Cancer, and I lost everything trying to save her. Carlos's eyes filled with tears. He walked over and hugged Marcus, not caring about his dirty clothes or smell. I'm so sorry, Carlos said. Linda was such a good woman, and you gave me a chance when no other restaurant would hire me. You helped me become a real chef. Jake watched this reunion with growing dread. If the kitchen staff remembered, Marcus too, then there was no way his story could be fake. Carlos, Jake said desperately. You can't be sure this is really him. He looks so different. Carlos turned to Jake with a stern expression. Young man, I worked with Marcus for 8 years. I know his voice, his mannerisms, the way he talks about food and customers. This is definitely him. The last of Jake's doubts crumbled away. The man he had humiliated and thrown out of the restaurant really was Marcus Thompson, the founder of the Golden Spoon. And now everyone knew it. The noise level in the restaurant had grown much louder. Customers were talking excitedly about what they had just learned. Some people were taking pictures and videos with their phones. The normal quiet dinner atmosphere had turned into something like a town meeting. Sarah Chen heard the commotion from her office in the back of the restaurant. She was 28 years old and had been the assistant manager at the Golden Spoon for 2 years. She was responsible for running the restaurant during evening hours when the main manager was not there. Sarah was working on the weekly inventory reports when she first heard raised voices from the dining room. At first, she thought it might just be a large group celebrating something. But the voices kept getting louder and more excited. Then Amy, the young waitress, came running into the office. Sarah, you need to come out here right now, Amy said, breathing hard. Something really big is happening. What kind of something? Sarah asked, looking up from her computer. Jake threw out a homeless man yesterday, and again tonight. But the homeless man says he's Marcus Thompson, the guy who started this restaurant, and he has papers to prove it. Sarah stopped typing and stared at Amy. What did you just say? The homeless man has business documents and a driver's license. Other customers are saying the papers look real, and Carlos came out of the kitchen and recognized him. Sarah felt her stomach drop. She had heard about Marcus Thompson from other employees, but she had never met him. The management company that hired her never talked about the restaurant's original owner. She assumed he had retired or moved away. Are you absolutely sure about this? Sarah asked. Mrs. Rodriguez confirmed it too, Amy said. She's been coming here forever, and she remembers him from when he used to run the place. Sarah quickly saved her work and stood up. Where is Jake now? He's still out there with the homeless man. With Marcus Thompson. He looks really scared. Sarah walked quickly toward the dining room. She could hear the buzz of conversation getting louder as she got closer. When she stepped out of the hallway, she could see a crowd of people gathered around the host stand. In the center of the crowd was a man who looked homeless. His clothes were dirty and worn. His hair was messy and too long. He clearly had not showered in a while, but he was holding papers and talking calmly while people listened. Jake was standing next to him, looking pale and nervous. When Jake saw Sarah approaching, his face showed relief. Sarah, thank goodness you're here, Jake said. This guy is claiming to be the original owner of the restaurant, but he's obviously just some crazy homeless person. Sarah looked at the man more carefully. Despite his appearance, there was something dignified about the way he stood and spoke. He was not acting aggressively or demanding special treatment. He seemed patient and sad more than anything else. Sir, Sarah said politely, I'm Sarah Chen, the assistant manager. Could you please explain the situation to me? Marcus turned to face Sarah. My name is Marcus Thompson. I founded the Golden Spoon 15 years ago. I built this restaurant from nothing, along with my late wife Linda. Due to some personal and financial difficulties, I had to give up most of my ownership to a management company about 3 months ago. Sarah nodded. And you have documentation to support this claim? Yes, I do. Marcus gestured to the papers spread out on the host stand. Business license, incorporation documents, property deed, and my identification. Sarah walked over to examine the papers. She had worked in restaurant management for 6 years and had seen many legal documents. These papers looked authentic to her, but she needed to be absolutely certain. "Would you mind if I took these documents to my office to verify them?" Sarah asked. "I have access to the restaurant's corporate files, and I can cross-reference the information." "Of course," Marcus said. "I understand you need to be careful." Sarah gathered up all the papers. "Please wait here. I'll be back in a few minutes." As Sarah walked back to her office, she could hear customers talking excitedly. "Can you believe? This is really happening," one woman said. "I feel so bad for him," said another. "He built this place and now he can't even afford to eat here. That waiter should be fired," an older man declared. "You don't treat people that way no matter who they are." In her office, Sarah opened her computer and pulled up the restaurant's corporate files. The management company had given her access to most of the business records when she was hired. She found a folder labeled Original Owner Information and opened it. Inside were scanned copies of the original business documents for the Golden Spoon. Sarah compared them to the papers Marcus had given her. The business license numbers matched exactly. The signatures looked identical. Even small details like the notary stamps and filing dates were the same. Sarah found more information in the files. There were emails between the management company and someone named Marcus Thompson from 3 months ago. The emails discussed the transfer of ownership and management responsibilities. They mentioned financial difficulties and the death of Thompson's wife. There were also employee records showing that Marcus Thompson had been the owner and primary manager of the restaurant from its opening until 3 months ago. The records listed his social security number, which matched the number on his driver's license. Sarah found photographs in the files from various restaurant events over the years. In the photos, she could see a well-dressed man who looked like a younger, healthier version of the homeless man outside. The bone structure and facial features were clearly the same person. The most convincing evidence was a video file from the restaurant's security system. It was dated about 4 months ago and showed Marcus Thompson in a business suit, working in the restaurant office. Even though he looked very different now, it was definitely the same person. Sarah sat back in her chair, feeling shocked. The homeless man Jake had thrown out really was Marcus Thompson, the founder of the Golden Spoon. The man who had created this successful restaurant was now living on the streets. Sarah also realized that Jake had made a terrible mistake. Not only had he been cruel to a fellow human being, but he had disrespected someone who was technically still a part owner of the business. She printed out several documents from the computer files and gathered up Marcus's original papers. When she stood up to go back to the dining room, her hands were shaking slightly. As Sarah walked back toward the crowd, she could see that more people had gathered. Some customers had finished their meals but were staying to see what would happen next. A few people had their phones out recording videos. Jake saw her coming and walked over quickly. "Well?" he asked anxiously. "The papers are fake, right? I mean, there's no way that guy is really the owner." Sarah looked at Jake seriously. "We need to talk privately after this is resolved." Jake's face went even paler. "What do you mean? What did you find?" Sarah walked past Jake and approached Marcus. The crowd of customers made room for her. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah said formally, "I've verified your documents against our corporate records. Everything checks out. You are indeed the founder and original owner of the Golden Spoon." A gasp went through the crowd. Some people started clapping. Others just stared in amazement. Marcus nodded sadly. "Thank you for taking the time to verify the information. I know it's hard to believe, given my current appearance." Sarah felt terrible about what had happened. "Mr. Thompson, I want to sincerely apologize for how you were treated. This is not how we want to conduct business." "I appreciate that," Marcus said, "but I want to be clear. I'm not here to cause trouble or to get anyone in difficulty. I just wanted to buy a meal." Sarah looked round at all the customers watching. Many of them looked angry at Jake. Some were shaking their heads in disapproval. "Of course, sir," Sarah said. "Please, let me seat you at our best table. Dinner will be on the house tonight." "That's not necessary," Marcus said. "I have money to pay for my food. I just want to be treated like any other customer." Sarah could see the dignity in Marcus despite his circumstances. He was not asking for charity or special treatment. He just wanted basic respect and the right to purchase a meal. Jake was standing nearby, looking like he might be sick. He was starting to understand the full magnitude of his mistake. "Sarah," Jake said quietly, "I was just following policy. We do have dress code standards." Sarah turned to look at Jake with stern eyes. "We'll discuss this later. Right now we need to focus on taking care of Mr. Thompson." Mrs. Rodriguez approached Sarah and Marcus. "If I may," she said, "I think everyone here would like to know more about what happened. How did you end up in this situation?" Marcus looked around at all the interested faces. These people had gone from seeing him as a nuisance to seeing him as a real person with a real story. "It's been a difficult few months," Marcus said simply. "Sometimes life takes unexpected turns." Sarah realized that this situation was much bigger than just a customer service problem. The founder of the restaurant was homeless and had been mistreated by her staff. This could become a public relations disaster if it was not handled properly. But more importantly, it was a human being who deserved compassion and help. "Mr. Thompson," Sarah said, "would you like to sit down and have a proper meal? And perhaps we could talk about your situation privately afterward?" Marcus smiled gratefully. "That would be very nice. Thank you." Sarah walked back into the dining room, carrying Marcus's documents and her printed verification papers. The restaurant had become busier with people who were not even customers. Word was spreading quickly through social media about what was happening at the Golden Spoon. As Sarah approached the crowd, she could see Jake standing off to the side. His face was pale and he kept running his hands through his hair. Other employees were watching nervously, wondering what would happen to their coworker. Sarah cleared her throat to get everyone's attention. The conversations slowly died down as people turned to listen to her. "Ladies and gentlemen," Sarah said in a clear, professional voice, "I have completed my investigation of Mr. Thompson's documents. I have cross-referenced them with our corporate files and verified the information through multiple sources." The restaurant became completely quiet. Even the background music seemed softer. Everyone was waiting to hear the official confirmation of what they already suspected. "I can confirm that this man is indeed Marcus Thompson, the founder and original owner of the Golden Spoon restaurant," Sarah announced. "His documents are authentic, and his identity has been verified beyond any doubt." The crowd erupted in a mixture of gasps, applause, and excited chatter. Several people took pictures of Marcus, who was standing quietly by the host's stand. He looked relieved, but also overwhelmed by all the attention. Jake felt like the floor was falling out from under him. He had been hoping against hope that somehow the documents would turn out to be fake. But now it was official. He had humiliated and mistreated the founder of the restaurant where he worked. "Furthermore," Sarah continued, "according to our corporate records, Mr. Thompson retains a 20% ownership stake in this restaurant. While he is not involved in daily operations, he is technically still one of the owners of this business." This announcement caused even more excitement in the crowd. Jake felt sick to his stomach. He had not just been rude to a customer, he had been rude to one of his bosses. Mrs. Rodriguez walked over to Marcus with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry for what you've been through," she said, "and I'm ashamed that you were treated so poorly in your own restaurant." "Thank you," Marcus said softly, "but please don't feel ashamed. You spoke up for me when others stayed quiet. That took courage." A young man with his phone out stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, I recorded most of what happened tonight. Would you like me to post this story online? I think people should know about how you were treated." Marcus thought for a moment. "That's very kind of you, but I'm not looking for revenge or to embarrass anyone. I just wanted to be treated like a human being." The young man nodded respectfully and put his phone away. Sarah approached Marcus with a formal expression. "Mr. Thompson, on behalf of the management and staff of the Golden Spoon, I want to offer you a sincere and complete apology for the treatment you received. This behavior does not represent our values or standards." "I appreciate the apology," Marcus said, "but I think we should focus on making sure this doesn't happen to other people in the future." Sarah nodded. "Absolutely. We will be reviewing our policies and providing additional training to all staff members about treating customers with dignity and respect. Jake knew he had to say something. He walked slowly toward Marcus, his legs feeling heavy. When he reached Marcus, Jake looked down at his own shoes, unable to make eye contact. "Mr. Thompson," Jake said in a shaky voice, I don't know what to say. I was completely wrong about everything. I judged you based on your appearance, and I treated you terribly." Marcus looked at Jake with patient eyes. "Yes, you did treat me poorly, but everyone makes mistakes, Jake." Jake was surprised that Marcus knew his name and was speaking to him, kindly despite everything that had happened. "I don't deserve your kindness," Jake said. "I was cruel to you. I embarrassed you in front of all these people, and I didn't even know that I was homeless?" Marcus asked gently. "You can say it. It's the truth. I just don't understand how someone who built all this could end up—" Jake trailed off, not wanting to say something else that might be hurtful. "End up living on the streets?" Marcus finished. "It's a long story, but the short version is that life can change very quickly. Bad things can happen to anyone, no matter how successful they used to be." Carlos, the chef, came out of the kitchen again. He had been watching everything from the kitchen doorway. When he saw Marcus talking calmly with Jake, he smiled. "That's exactly the kind of person Marcus always was," Carlos told the crowd. "Even when things went wrong in the restaurant, he never yelled at employees. He always tried to teach us and help us do better." An older customer spoke up. "Young man," he said to Jake, "you should be grateful to work for someone with such character. Not many bosses would be so forgiving after being treated the way you treated him." Jake finally looked up at Marcus. "Why are you being so nice to me? I don't deserve it." Marcus was quiet for a moment, thinking about his answer. "Jake, 3 months ago I was living in a beautiful house and running 3 successful restaurants. I thought I had my whole life figured out. Then my wife died. I lost everything, and I ended up sleeping in doorways." Marcus paused and looked around at all the people listening to his story. When you're homeless, you learn very quickly how people really think about you. Most people look right through you like you don't exist. Some people are afraid of you. Others are disgusted by you. Very few people treat you like you're still a human being with feelings and dignity. Jake listened carefully, starting to understand the impact of his actions. "What I learned," Marcus continued, "is that how we treat people who can't help us or give us anything in return shows who we really are as human beings. I was hoping that the restaurant I built would be a place where everyone felt welcome, regardless of their circumstances." A woman in the crowd started crying. "That's so beautiful," she said. "Everyone should hear this story." Marcus turned back to Jake. "So I'm being kind to you because that's who I choose to be, not because of what you did or didn't do. But I hope you'll learn from this experience." Jake nodded vigorously. "I will, sir. I promise I will." Sarah stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, I know you retain ownership in the restaurant, but I want to ask, how would you like us to handle this situation going forward?" Marcus thought carefully before answering. "I think Jake should keep his job, but with some conditions. I'd like him to volunteer at a homeless shelter for 1 day each week for the next 3 months. I want him to meet homeless people and hear their stories. I want him to understand that they're human beings, not problems to be solved." Jake looked surprised. You're not going to fire me?" "No," Marcus said. "But I want you to learn from this. I want you to become the kind of person who treats everyone with respect, not just people who look successful." Sarah nodded approvingly. "That sounds like an excellent learning opportunity. We'll arrange for Jake to volunteer at the Union Gospel Mission downtown." The customers in the restaurant were amazed by Marcus's response. Instead of seeking revenge, he was trying to educate someone who had mistreated him. "What about you, Mr. Thompson?" Mrs. Rodriguez asked. "What will you do now? Do you plan to return to running the restaurant?" Marcus shook his head sadly. "I'm not ready for that yet. I still have a lot of personal issues to work through, but knowing that I'm welcome here again means more to me than you could possibly understand." Amy, the young waitress, came over to Marcus. Mr. Thompson, would you like me to bring you some dinner? Carlos has been preparing your favorite meal from the old menu. Marcus smiled. That would be wonderful. Thank you, Amy. As Amy walked back toward the kitchen, Marcus called after her. And Amy, thank you for standing up for me yesterday. I heard what you said to Mrs. Rodriguez about feeling terrible. That meant a lot. Amy blushed and smiled. You're welcome, sir. Sarah realized that many customers were still standing around listening instead of eating their own meals. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience during this unusual situation. Please feel free to return to your dinners. And Mr. Thompson, your meal tonight is absolutely on the house. That's very generous, Marcus said, but I'd prefer to pay for my food. I want to be treated like any other customer. As people began returning to their tables, the conversations continued in excited whispers. Everyone had just witnessed something extraordinary. The homeless man who had been thrown out was actually the founder of the restaurant, and he had responded to mistreatment with kindness and wisdom. Jake stood near Marcus, still processing everything that had happened. Mr. Thompson, I have one more question. How did you stay so calm through all of this? If someone had treated me the way I treated you, I would have been furious. Marcus smiled sadly. Jake, when you lose everything you care about, you learn what's really important. My wife is gone, my house is gone, my money is gone, but my character and my values are still with me. Those are the only things I have left that really matter. The young man with the phone approached them again. Mr. Thompson, I changed my mind about posting the video. I think this story could help other people understand homelessness better. Would that be okay with you? Marcus considered this. Marcus sat at table 12 by the window, the same table where Mrs. Rodriguez always sat. She had insisted he take her spot so he could look out at the street where he had been walking just an hour earlier. The warm light from inside the restaurant made everything outside look cold and dark. Carlos had prepared Marcus's favorite meal from the original menu, herb-crusted salmon with roasted vegetables and wild rice. It was a dish that Marcus and Linda had created together in the early days of the restaurant. As the food was placed in front of him, Marcus felt a wave of memories wash over him. This smells exactly like I remember, Marcus said to Carlos, who had personally brought the meal out from the kitchen. I still make it the same way you taught me, Carlos replied. Some things should never change. Sarah sat down across from Marcus at the table. Most of the other customers had gone back to their own meals, but they kept glancing over with curiosity and respect. Mr. Thompson, Sarah said quietly, I need to ask you something important. What would you like us to do about Jake? I know you said he should keep his job, but the management company might have different ideas when they hear about this. Marcus took a bite of his salmon and thought carefully before answering. Sarah, when I built this restaurant, I made a lot of mistakes. I hired the wrong people sometimes. I trusted people I shouldn't have. I made business decisions that didn't work out. He paused and looked across the restaurant toward Jake, who was nervously seating a new family at a corner table. But you know, what I learned. People can change if you give them the chance. Jake made a terrible mistake, but he seems genuinely sorry about it. If we fire him, he might never learn why what he did was wrong. If we help him understand, he could become a better person. Sarah nodded. The volunteer work at the homeless shelter's a good idea. But shouldn't there be other consequences too? I think Jake is already facing the biggest consequence, Marcus said. He has to live with knowing that he treated another human being cruelly. That's going to stay with him for a long time. Marcus looked out the window at the people walking by on the street. Some of them were well-dressed and walking quickly to somewhere important. Others moved more slowly, carrying their belongings in bags or pushing shopping carts. You know what the real problem is? Marcus continued. It's not that Jake is a bad person. The real problem is that our society teaches people to judge others based on their appearance. We're taught that successful people deserve respect and poor people don't. Sarah was listening carefully. She had never thought about it that way before. When I was successful, Marcus said, people treated me with respect because they thought
I was important. Now that I'm homeless, most people treat me like I'm worthless. But I'm the same person inside. My circumstances changed, but my humanity didn't. Across the restaurant, Jake was struggling to focus on his work.
He kept making small mistakes, bringing water to the wrong table, forgetting to give people menus. His mind was replaying the events of the evening over and over again. After about 30 minutes, Marcus finished his meal. It was the first hot, well-prepared food he had eaten in weeks. But more than that, it was the first time in months that he had been treated like a valued customer. "Sarah," Marcus said, "could you ask Jake to come over here? I'd like to speak with him privately." Sarah nodded and walked over to get Jake. When Jake approached the table, he looked nervous and ashamed. "Sit down, Jake," Marcus said gently. "I want to tell you something." Jake sat down carefully, as if he was afraid Marcus might change his mind about being kind to him. "I want you to understand something important," Marcus began. "What happened tonight wasn't really about me. It was about how we choose to treat people who seem different from us." Jake nodded, but didn't speak. 3 months ago, if you had seen me in a business suit, you would have treated me very differently. You would have smiled, been polite, maybe even tried to impress me, but the person inside would have been exactly the same. Jake looked down at his hands. "You're right. I was judging you based on your clothes and how you looked. The question is," Marcus continued, "what are you going to do with this knowledge? Are you going to keep judging people by their appearance, or are you going to start seeing them as human beings first?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft and sincere. "Mr. Thompson, I want to be honest with you. I grew up in a wealthy family. I went to private schools. I've never really been around homeless people before. I was always taught that they were dangerous or lazy or drug addicts." Marcus nodded. "I understand. Many people think that way because they've never heard the real stories of how people become homeless." "Working at the homeless shelter," Jake said. "Do you think that will really help me understand?" "I hope so," Marcus replied. "You'll meet people who lost their jobs, people who got sick and couldn't afford medical bills, people who had mental health problems, veterans who couldn't adjust after coming home from war. You'll learn that most homeless people are just regular people who faced impossible circumstances." Mrs. Rodriguez had been watching from her new table nearby. She came over and sat down with Marcus and Jake. "If I may add something," she said, "I think what happened tonight could actually be a blessing in disguise." Both men looked at her with curiosity. "Marcus, your story is going to be shared on social media and probably in the news. People are going to hear about how the founder of a successful restaurant ended up homeless and how he was treated when he tried to buy a meal." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "I don't want this to become a big public story." "But it should be," Mrs. Rodriguez insisted. "Not for your sake, but for the sake of all the other homeless people who get treated badly every day. Your story shows that homelessness can happen to anyone, and that every person deserves dignity and respect." Jake nodded enthusiastically. "She's right. Maybe other business owners and employees will think twice before judging people by their appearance." Sarah approached the table with a concerned expression. "Mr. Thompson, I just got a call from my district manager. Word about tonight has already reached the corporate office. They want to schedule a meeting with you tomorrow morning." Marcus sighed. "I hope they're not planning to make a big publicity campaign out of this." "Actually," Sarah said, "I think they want to discuss bringing you back into the business in some capacity. Your story demonstrates exactly the kind of values they want the restaurant chain to represent." Marcus was surprised. "I'm not sure I'm ready for that. I still have a lot of personal issues to work through." "You don't have to decide anything right away," Sarah said, "but they're very interested in having you involved again, even if it's just as a consultant or spokesperson for treating all customers with respect." Jake looked at Marcus with hope in his eyes. "If you do come back, would you be willing to help? Train employees? I think everyone could learn from your perspective." Marcus smiled. "Jake, a week ago I would never have imagined this conversation. I was just trying to survive from day to day. Now you're asking me to help train restaurant workers?" "Life can change quickly," Jake said, repeating Marcus's words from earlier. "Sometimes in good ways too." As the evening wound down, customers, began leaving the restaurant. Many of them stopped by Marcus's table to shake his hand or offer words of encouragement. Several people left their business cards, offering job opportunities or places to stay. The young man who had recorded the evening's events came over one last time. "Mr. Thompson, I wanted you to know that I've decided to start a fundraising campaign to help you get back on your feet. Is that something you would be comfortable with?" Marcus thought about it carefully. "I appreciate the gesture, but I'd prefer if any money raised went to local homeless shelters instead. There are many people who need help more than I do," the young man smiled. "That's exactly the response I expected from you. You're a class act, sir." As the restaurant began closing for the night, Marcus stood up from his table. He had nowhere to go except back to the streets, but something had changed inside him. For the first time in months, he felt hope. Sarah approached him with an envelope. "Mr. Thompson, I took the liberty of booking you a room at the hotel across the street for tonight. It's paid for by the restaurant." Marcus started to protest, but Sarah held up her hand. "Please, it's the least we can do after what happened, and you have that meeting tomorrow morning with the corporate office." Marcus accepted the envelope gratefully. "Thank you, Sarah. This has been an extraordinary evening." Jake came over as Marcus was preparing to leave. "Mr. Thompson, I start volunteering at the homeless shelter this Saturday. Would you maybe visit sometime and help me understand what I should be learning?" Marcus put his hand on Jake's shoulder. "I'll try to stop by, Jake. But remember, the real learning comes from listening to people's stories and treating them with kindness." As Marcus walked toward the door, the entire restaurant staff lined up to say goodbye. Carlos gave him another hug. Amy had tears in her eyes. Even some of the customers who were still finishing their meals stood up to applaud. At the door, Marcus turned back to look at the golden spoon one more time. It still didn't look exactly like the restaurant he had built with Linda, but it felt like home again. "Thank you all," Marcus said simply.